After the flood, the earth seemed to have received a new chance. The waters had gone down. The ark had rested. Noah had stepped out with his family into a world washed by judgment and marked by mercy. The rainbow appeared in the sky as a sign of covenant, reminding humanity that God had not abandoned creation, even after all the corruption that had filled the earth. For a moment, we might imagine that mankind had finally learned. After seeing the ancient world disappear beneath the waters, perhaps humanity would now live with more reverence, more humility, and a deeper awareness of its own fragility. Perhaps the descendants of Noah would look back at recent history and understand that no civilization can stand on strength, pride, and desire alone. But the Bible shows us something far deeper and more uncomfortable. The problem of mankind was not only in the world before the flood, it was inside the human heart. The waters cleansed the earth, but they did not heal pride. Judgment interrupted a corrupted generation, but it did not remove from humanity the desire to live without depending on God. And it is in this setting that the story of the Tower of Babel appears. The biblical text is short, but its message is immense. In just a few words, Genesis shows us humanity gathered together, speaking the same language, moving in the same direction, and sharing the same ambition. They arrive in a plain in the land of Shinar and decide to build a city. But not only a city, they also want to build a tower with its top reaching into the heavens. At first glance, this could look like nothing more than a great architectural project, a sign of organization, intelligence, and progress. Men working together, mastering techniques, producing bricks, raising structures, and planning the future. And here is the first tension of the story. Building is not the problem. The Bible does not condemn work, creativity, intelligence, or the human ability to organize life in society. From the beginning, mankind received a calling to care for, cultivate, name, develop, and govern creation. The problem of Babel was not in the brick, the city, or the technique. The problem was in the intention. They said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower, with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered over the face of the whole earth." That sentence reveals the heart of Babel. Let us make a name for ourselves. Babel is born from the human desire to be great without God, to be remembered without obedience, to find security without depending on divine promise, to build an identity that does not need to kneel before the Creator. The tower was not only a tall structure, it was a monument to fear and pride. Fear of being scattered, fear of losing control, fear of being forgotten, fear of having no name, and, at the same time, enough pride to believe they could solve all of this by building something that reached the heavens. That is why Babel still feels so current. Today, we may not build towers of brick in the plain of Shinar, but we still build our own Babels. We build reputations so we will not be ignored. We build careers so we will not feel small. We build public images to hide private insecurities. We build platforms, brands, achievements, and narratives, trying to prove that our lives have weight. And none of these things is necessarily wrong in itself. To work, grow, create, build, study, lead, and develop something can be a legitimate part of human life. The danger begins when what we build stops being an expression of service and becomes an attempt at salvation. Some people are not only working, they are trying to justify their existence. They are not only seeking stability, they are trying to defeat the fear that they are not enough. They are not only trying to grow, they are trying to make a name for themselves because, deep down, they are afraid that if they stop producing, no one will remember them. Babel forces us to ask, what are we building, and why? That question is deep because two people can do exactly the same thing for completely different reasons. Two people can build a house, a business, a family, a ministry, a channel, a career, or a project. One may be doing it as an act of gratitude and responsibility before God. The other may be doing it to fill an emptiness, control the future, or prove their worth. The outside may look the same. The heart may be completely different. Babel was a visible city, but its true structure was hidden inside the people who built it. Every brick carried a spiritual ambition. Every layer of the tower said, "We do not need to be led. We can rise. We can protect ourselves. We can make our own name." And here, the story becomes deeply ironic. The people wanted to build a tower that reached the heavens, but the text says that God came down to see the city and the tower that the children of man had built. They thought they were rising very high, but before God, that great human work was so small that He came down to see it. This is one of the strongest ironies in the entire narrative. What looked enormous in human eyes was small before heaven. The tower that was meant to reach God did not even come close to impressing Him. This does not diminish human intelligence. It diminishes human arrogance. There is a difference between recognizing the ability God gave mankind and turning that ability into an idol. Babel shows what happens when humanity uses its gifts against the purpose of the giver. Intelligence becomes pride. Unity becomes rebellion. Progress becomes a monument to the ego. And God sees. God sees the city. He sees the tower. He sees the intention, and He also sees the future that this path would produce. The divine intervention at Babel was not an attack on human creativity. It was a merciful interruption of a path toward self-destruction. When God confuses the languages, He is not only punishing, He is limiting the power of a humanity united around its own pride. That may sound severe, but there is mercy inside this judgment. A humanity completely united without God does not become more holy. It becomes more dangerous. When the heart is corrupted, unity does not solve the problem. It only gives more strength to the error. This is an important lesson for our time. Not every unity is good. Not every consensus is wise. Not every collective movement is righteous. A crowd can agree and still be walking in the wrong direction. An entire culture can celebrate something and still be spiritually blind. A generation can share the same language, the same desires, the same fears, and the same idols, and still be building against God. Babel reminds us that the question is not only whether we are united. The more important question is, united around what? If we are united around vanity, our unity becomes dangerous. If we are united around fear, our unity becomes a prison. If we are united around the desire to replace God, our unity becomes Babel. That is why God scatters the people and confuses their language. The city that was meant to prevent dispersion becomes the very place from which everyone is dispersed. The project that was supposed to produce a name becomes remembered as a symbol of confusion. The monument to human autonomy becomes a witness to human limitation. And here, there is a hard reflection. Sometimes God has to confuse what we are building in order to save what we are becoming. Sometimes the collapse of a project is not only failure, it may be deliverance. Sometimes a closed door is not rejection. It may be protection. Sometimes the thing that did not work out was exactly the thing that would have turned us into someone we were never meant to become. Babel teaches that not every construction should be completed. There are towers that, if finished, would destroy the soul of the builder. There are ambitions that look glorious in the beginning, but demand a spiritual price too high to pay. There are dreams that promise greatness, but require us to abandon humility, obedience, and dependence on God. And perhaps this is a question each of us needs to ask with courage. Is there any tower in my life that God is trying to interrupt? It may be a pursuit of recognition, an obsession with control, a relationship built on fear, a career driven only by comparison, a project that began as a calling but became vanity, a public image that requires the soul to live in hiding. Not every tower looks sinful from the outside. Some are admired. Some receive applause. Some look like signs of success. But God does not measure only height. He weighs intention. Babel is the story of people who wanted to rise, but did not want to surrender. And then, immediately after Babel, something extraordinary happens in the biblical narrative. Humanity tries to make a name for itself, but God calls Abraham and promises, "I will make your name great." That contrast is too powerful to ignore. In Babel, people try to manufacture their own name. In Abraham, God promises to give a name. In Babel, humanity tries to climb up to the heavens. In Abraham, God comes down in grace and calls one man to walk by faith. In Babel, the fear of being scattered produces rebellion. In Abraham, the call of God produces a journey. This teaches us that the safest name is not the one we build for ourselves, but the one we receive from God. The deepest greatness is not born from self-promotion, but from obedience. The truest security is not found in controlling everything around us, but in walking with the one who knows the destination before the first step is taken. Perhaps Babel is so important because it reveals a universal temptation. We want to be remembered without being transformed. We want to reach heaven without abandoning pride. We want blessing without surrender. We want a name without a cross. But God does not call us to build a life that impresses heaven. He calls us to live a life surrendered before Him. The Tower of Babel fell before it was completed, but its message remained. It crossed generations because it is not only about languages or ancient peoples. It is about the human heart. It is about our tendency to trade trust for control, calling for vanity, community for collective pride, and progress for idolatry. The final question is not whether we are building something. We all are. We build habits, families, paths, reputations, memories, decisions, and legacies. The question is whether what we are building is born from obedience or from the attempt to no longer need God. A life can look tall and still be empty. A tower can touch the clouds and still be far from heaven. And a name can be known by many, yet unknown before God. Babel invites us to look at our own hands, our own bricks, and our own plans, and ask honestly, am I building to serve or to be seen? Am I seeking to fulfill a calling or to manufacture an identity? Am I walking with God or trying to raise something that will free me from having to trust Him? The story ends with humanity scattered, but it does not end without hope. Because after the confusion, God calls Abraham. After the dispersion, God begins a promise. After human pride, God reveals grace. And this shows us that the final word of the story does not belong to the fallen tower, but to the God who continues calling people out of confusion. Babel is the portrait of humanity trying to make a name for itself. Abraham will be the portrait of a man who receives a promise from God. And between one story and the other, there is a choice that still stands before us: to live building towers to prove who we are, or to walk by faith with the one who knows our name before the world ever does. Thank you for watching. If this episode helped you reflect, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more biblical reflections like this. Until the next story, may we not only hear these stories, but learn how to live differently because of them.